The shuttle bay doors of Concordia Prime opened with a soft hiss, revealing the most unusual diplomatic station ever built. Ambassador Lisa Carter stepped out first, her simple black suit a stark contrast to the ornate ceremonial robes worn by every other species' delegates. Behind her followed Colonel Jake Morrison in his crisp military uniform, Dr. Amy Foster carrying a worn leather briefcase, and Peter Hayes with his tablet already recording everything. The station stretched out before them like a small city floating in space. Built specifically for this peace summit, Concordia Prime represented 3 years of careful planning by 7 different alien species. Each section was designed to accommodate different atmospheric needs, gravity preferences, and cultural requirements. The humans had requested only basic life support and artificial gravity. Nothing special. "Welcome to Concordia Prime," announced the station's artificial intelligence in a dozen different languages simultaneously. The translation came through clearly in English, though Lisa noticed it sounded oddly formal compared to how humans normally spoke. As they walked through the central corridor, other delegates stopped their conversations to stare. The Zephyrians, tall beings made of living crystal, chimed softly to each other in frequencies that made the walls vibrate. Their leader, Shard Commander Velthak, stood nearly 8 feet tall with faceted surfaces that reflected light in rainbow patterns. His ceremonial armor was carved with intricate designs showing his family's history going back thousands of years. The Manthari delegation clustered together like a small army. Each insectoid warrior stood 6 feet tall, with 4 arms and compound, eyes that never seemed to blink. Their queen, Zikith, wore golden plates across her exoskeleton, each one engraved with symbols representing her hive's achievements. The clicking sounds they made to communicate reminded Lisa of old computers processing data. Representatives from 6 other species filled the corridor. The Velkari looked like walking plants with bark-like skin and leaves instead of hair. The Threnodi were small, furry creatures with huge eyes who seemed to communicate through complex musical tones. Each group wore elaborate clothing that clearly marked their status, their history, and their cultural importance. Lisa Carter looked around and smiled. "Nice place they built here," she said to Jake Morrison, her voice carrying easily in the corridor. Several alien heads turned toward her, surprised by the casual tone. Colonel Morrison nodded. "Good security set up, too. They know what they're doing." He had already spotted 12 different defensive positions and 3 escape routes, but his voice sounded relaxed, almost bored. Dr. Foster was examining the station's construction with obvious interest. "Look at how they integrated the different atmospheric systems," she said to Peter Hayes. "Each species gets exactly what they need, but the transitions are seamless. That's some impressive engineering." Peter Hayes held up his tablet, scanning the various alien technologies around them. "The translation matrix alone is worth studying. Real-time conversion between 14 different communication methods, including chemical signals and electromagnetic patterns." The human delegation continued walking, discussing the station like tourists visiting a museum. They pointed out interesting features, asked questions about the technology, and seemed genuinely curious about everything they saw. Other delegates watched this behavior with growing confusion. Shard Commander Velthak approached them, his crystal body chiming with formal tones. The translation system converted his words into careful, ceremonial English. "Human delegation, you must prepare for the ceremony of approaching. All species must demonstrate their peaceful intentions through the showing of vulnerabilities. Lisa." Carter looked at him with friendly interest. "What kind of ceremony?" Each delegation removes their protective coverings and presents their most sacred possessions to show trust, Velthok explained. It is how civilized species begin negotiations. We have practiced this ritual for over 10,000 years. The humans looked at each other. Jake Morrison shrugged. We don't really have protective coverings. These are just regular clothes. Dr. Foster added, and we didn't bring any sacred possessions. We figured we'd just talk things through. The Zephyrian leader's crystal form dimmed with what might have been confusion. Around the corridor, other aliens stopped their conversations entirely. The Manthari Queen's compound eyes focused on the humans with new intensity. You must understand, Velthok continued, his tone becoming more urgent. The ceremony establishes the proper relationship between species. It shows respect for the ancient ways of peace. Lisa Carter nodded politely. We respect that it's important to you, but humans don't really do formal ceremonies for negotiations. We prefer to just sit down and work things out directly. Peter Hayes looked up from his tablet. Though we'd be happy to observe while you perform your ceremony, it sounds fascinating. From an anthropological perspective, the silence that followed was uncomfortable. Every alien delegate in the corridor seemed to be staring at the humans now. Whispered conversations began in a dozen different languages, with translation systems working overtime to convert the growing chatter. Hive Queen Zikth stepped forward, her four arms moving in complex gestures that the translation system identified as formal diplomatic language. Human delegation, you cannot simply ignore established protocols. These rituals prevent war. They create the proper mindset for peace. Amy Foster tilted her head thoughtfully. That's interesting. Humans actually do our best thinking when we're relaxed and informal. Rigid protocols tend to get in the way of real problem-solving. But without proper ceremony, clicked another Manthari. How do we know you take this seriously? How do we know you respect the gravity of our situation? Jake. Morrison's expression grew more serious. Ma'am, we've been fighting each other for 3 years. We've seen what each of our species can do in combat. Trust me, we take this very seriously. We're here because we want to stop the fighting and find a better way forward. Lisa Carter added, the fact that we're willing to sit in the same room and talk instead of shooting at each other seems like a pretty good start to me. The alien delegates exchanged more urgent whispers. The concept of treating such a momentous occasion as merely sitting down to talk seemed to disturb them deeply. Several smaller species began backing away from the humans, as if proximity to such casual attitudes might be dangerous. Perhaps, suggested a Velkari delegate, its leaf-like appendages rustling with nervousness, the human delegation requires time to understand the proper procedures? We understand them, Lisa said with a friendly smile. We just don't think they're necessary. We're here to end a war and build something better. Everything else is just decoration. As the humans continued toward their assigned quarters, the corridor filled with increasingly frantic alien communications. The translation. Systems picked up fragments. Unprecedented behavior, dangerous precedent, complete disregard for proper order. The peace summit hadn't even officially begun, and already the alien delegates were discovering that humans approached diplomacy unlike any species they had ever encountered. The absence of ceremony, the casual attitudes, and the direct approach to serious matters created an atmosphere of uncertainty that rippled through every delegation. In their quarters that evening, the human team reviewed their first day. I think we made quite an impression, Lisa Carter said, looking out at the stars through their viewport. Jake Morrison checked his security reports. They're definitely talking about us. Every communication channel is buzzing. Amy Foster was already studying recordings of alien behavior. Fascinating. They seemed genuinely disturbed by our informal approach. It's like we're breaking fundamental rules they didn't even know they had. Peter Hayes looked up from his analysis. Tomorrow should be interesting. The real negotiations begin, and we still haven't figured out how to explain to them that we actually want to help everyone involved. Outside their quarters, alien delegates continued their urgent discussions late into the station's night cycle, trying to understand what kind of species treated the most important diplomatic summit in galactic history like a simple business meeting. The main conference room stretched across 3 levels, with each alien species positioned according to their environmental needs. The Zephyrians occupied the upper level, where crystal formations provided them with proper light refraction. The Manthari clustered on the middle tier, their compound eyes scanning every movement below. The smaller species filled the lower level, creating a natural hierarchy that had been established over thousands of years of galactic politics. The humans sat at a simple table on the main floor, looking completely out of place among the elaborate seating arrangements designed for each species. Lisa Carter had a coffee cup beside her notepad. Jake Morrison sat with his arms crossed, observing everything with calm interest. Amy Foster spread several data tablets across the table, while Peter Hayes quietly recorded the proceedings. Shard Commander. Velthak began the session by activating a holographic display that filled the center of the room. Complex star charts appeared, showing territorial boundaries that had been fought over for 3 years. Red zones marked areas of heavy conflict. Yellow regions indicated disputed territories. Green spaces showed areas where temporary ceasefires held. The Zephyrian Collective presents the standard framework for peace, Velthak announced, his crystal voice echoing through the chamber. Territorial divisions based on current military positions, tribute payments from defeated sectors to victorious ones, formal acknowledgement of combat losses and territorial concessions. The hologram shifted to show detailed breakdowns of resource transfers, population relocations, and military restrictions. Each calculation had been made according to treaties that dated back millennia. The framework was precise, logical, and had ended dozens of galactic conflicts. Hive Queen Zikth rose from her position, her 4 arms gesturing toward different sections of the display. The Manthari Collective agrees with these terms. Combat strength determines territorial rights. Resource allocation follows established galactic law. Population transfers ensure species separation and reduce future conflict. One by one, the other species voiced their agreement. The Velkari delegation rustled their approval. The Threnodi sang harmonious agreements. The framework represented everything the galaxy understood about ending wars between different species. Lisa Carter listened, politely to each presentation, occasionally making notes on her simple notepad. When the last species finished speaking, she stood up and walked to the center of the room. The holographic display automatically adjusted to accommodate her presence. "Thank you all for explaining your approach," she said, her voice carrying easily through the chamber without any amplification. "We appreciate the time and effort that went into these calculations. But humans have a different proposal." The silence that followed was immediate and complete. In galactic history, no species had ever rejected the standard peace framework. The framework had ended every major conflict for over 5,000 years. Amy Foster joined Lisa at the center of the room, carrying one of her data tablets. "We've been studying each of your species during the conflict," she said conversationally. "Not just your military capabilities, but your cultures, your technologies, your needs. Jake Morrison remained seated but spoke clearly. We discovered some interesting things that could benefit everyone here. Peter Hayes activated his own display system, and new holograms appeared alongside the territorial charts. These showed technological diagrams, cultural exchange programs, and something no alien species had ever seen in a peace negotiation: offers of assistance to former enemies. The Zephyrian crystal growth cycles, Amy Foster began, pointing to a complex biological diagram, can be extended by 300% using human medical techniques we developed for treating our own silicon-based computer systems. This would allow your people to live much longer lives. Velthak's crystal form flickered with surprise. Extending crystal growth cycles was something his people had been trying to achieve for generations. The possibility of tripling their lifespans was beyond their most optimistic research projections. Lisa Carter moved to another section of the display. The Manthari need more breeding worlds to support their expanding hive populations. Human terraforming technology can create suitable environments on planets that are currently too hostile for your species. Zix's compound eyes focused intently on the terraforming data. Her species had been limited to 12 breeding worlds for over a century. The population pressure was becoming critical, but finding suitable planets had proved nearly impossible. For the smaller species, Peter Hayes added, activating another display section. We offer military protection agreements, not occupation or control, but genuine defense partnerships. Human fleets can patrol your territories while you focus on developing your own civilizations. The smaller alien delegates shifted nervously. The concept of a stronger species offering protection without demanding tribute or territory was completely foreign to galactic politics. Amy Foster returned to the center of the room. But here's what might interest you most. During our conflict, humans developed detailed analyses of each species' combat methods, technological capabilities, and strategic thinking patterns. She gestured, and the display showed tactical breakdowns that made every alien delegate stiffen with alarm. The information was incredibly detailed, covering weaknesses that each species thought they had kept secret. We know about the Zephyrian vulnerability to certain electromagnetic frequencies, Amy continued calmly. We identified the Manthari communication lag between hive clusters. We mapped the supply routes that every species depends on for their war efforts. Jake Morrison stood up slowly. We could have used this information to end the war much faster. We could have targeted your weaknesses and forced surrender within months, instead of fighting for 3 years. The conference room filled with tense whispers and urgent communications between alien delegates. The realization that humans had been holding back devastating capabilities during the conflict was deeply disturbing. But we didn't use any of it, Lisa Carter said simply. We fought you straight up, strength against strength, because that seemed more fair. We wanted to see what you could really do when pushed to your limits. Peter Hayes brought up additional displays showing human military capabilities that had never been used in combat, weapon systems that remained theoretical, strategies that had been developed but never implemented, technologies that could have changed the entire nature of the conflict. Why? Velthak asked, his crystal voice showing strain. Why would you fight with restrictions when you could have achieved total victory? Amy Foster smiled. Because total victory wouldn't have taught us anything about you. We learned more about each species by fighting alongside you and against you than we ever could have by simply defeating you. Lisa Carter returned to her simple table and picked up her coffee cup. Humans have a saying, You learn more about someone in an hour of play than in a year of conversation. We consider combat to be a form of communication. 3 years of fighting taught us that every species here is worth knowing better. The alien delegates struggled to process this information. The concept of viewing warfare as communication, rather than simple conquest, was beyond their understanding. The idea that a species would deliberately limit their advantages to learn about their opponents seemed impossible. Hive Queen Zixth spoke carefully. You studied us during combat to understand. How to help us afterward? Exactly, Jake Morrison replied. We wanted to know what each species needed, what they valued, what they were capable of achieving. You can't build good partnerships without understanding your partners. The holographic displays continued showing human offers, technology transfers, cultural exchange programs, joint research projects, mutual defense agreements. Every proposal involved giving something valuable to former enemies without demanding anything in return except cooperation. This is unprecedented, whispered a Velkari delegate. No species offers aid to those who fought against them. Lisa Carter finished her coffee and set the cup down. Humans do. Some of our closest allies on Earth were once our greatest enemies. We've learned that the people who fight hardest against you often make the best partners once the fighting stops. The conference room fell silent as alien delegates tried to understand a species that became more generous toward those who had hurt them most. The human approach to peace was unlike anything in recorded galactic history, and it terrified them precisely because it seemed to work. The negotiations had been running for 6 hours without a break. Other species would have called for rest periods, formal meals, and ceremonial pauses. The humans simply kept working, occasionally sharing snacks from their supply packs and refilling. Their coffee cups from a portable machine they had brought, Shard Commander Velthak finally raised one of his crystal arms to halt the discussion. The faceted surfaces of his body were dim with exhaustion. We must pause these proceedings. The Zephyrian delegation requires time to process what has been presented. Lisa Carter looked up from her notes with surprise. Oh, sure. Do you need a few minutes? We require several hours to consult with our homeworld councils, Velthak replied, stiffly. These proposals are beyond our authority to accept or reject without proper consultation. Hive Queen Zixth clicked agreement with her 4 arms. The Manthari collective must commune with the greater hive mind. These concepts require analysis by thousands of our thinkers. The other alien species echoed similar needs. Complex proposals required complex consultation processes. Home governments needed to be contacted. Council meetings had to be arranged. Proper procedures demanded careful consideration. Amy Foster looked around the room with genuine curiosity. How long do these consultation processes usually take? Between 3 and 7 standard days, replied a Velkari delegate, depending on the complexity of the decisions required. Jake Morrison checked his watch. We were hoping to wrap this up by tomorrow. Earth wants us back for another assignment next week. The silence that followed was so complete that the station's air recycling system seemed loud by comparison. Every alien delegate stared at the humans with expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. You expected to resolve a galactic peace treaty in 2 days? Velthak asked, his crystal voice cracking slightly. Peter Hayes looked up from his tablet. Well, we figured we'd lay out what everyone needs, work out the details, and sign the agreements. How complicated could it be? Lisa Carter sensed the growing tension in the room. She stood up and walked to where the alien delegates were clustered together. I think we need to clear something up. You all seem confused about why we're offering such generous terms to former enemies. Is that right? Several species nodded, or made equivalent gestures. The Threnody sang a low, worried melody that the translation system identified as deep concern. Okay, Lisa said, settling into a chair near the alien delegates. Let me tell you something about human history. Some of our closest allies today were once our worst enemies. Amy Foster joined the informal gathering. 200 years ago, several nations on Earth fought a devastating war. Millions died. Cities were destroyed. The conflict lasted for years and changed the entire planet. Afterward, Jake Morrison added, those same nations became partners in space exploration. They built the first interstellar ships together. Some of the people who had been shooting at each other ended up working side by side on Mars colonies. The alien delegates listened with growing bewilderment. Such cooperation between former enemies violated every principle of galactic politics. But why? Asked Zixth, her compound eyes fixed on Lisa Carter. Why would you trust those who had proven themselves dangerous to you? Lisa smiled. Because they proved they were worth trusting. Anyone can fight when they're winning. But species that fight hard when they're losing, that keep their honor even in defeat, that protect their people no matter what happens, those are the kinds of people you want as friends. Peter Hayes brought up historical records on his tablet. Earth has dozens of examples. Ancient enemies becoming close allies after testing each other in combat. We have a saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But we also believe that a worthy enemy can become the best kind of friend. Amy Foster leaned forward. During our 3-year conflict, we watched how each of your species behaved under pressure. The Zephyrians never abandoned their wounded, even when retreat would have been smarter. The Manthari fought to protect colonies that had no strategic value, just because civilians lived there. The smaller species formed alliances to help each other survive, Jake Morrison continued. You shared resources, coordinated defenses, and never betrayed your partners even when it would have been easier. Lisa Carter's expression grew more serious. Those actions told us everything we needed to know about your character. Species that act with honor during war can be trusted during peace. Velthak's crystal form brightened slightly. You were evaluating our trustworthiness through combat? Exactly, Peter Hayes replied. Anyone can make promises when nothing is at stake. But how someone behaves when everything is on the line, that tells you who they really are. The concept slowly began to make sense to some of the alien delegates, but it raised new concerns. If humans viewed combat as a character test, what did that say about human nature? A small Threnody delegate sang a question that translated as deep worry. If you see war as evaluation, do humans seek conflict for its own sake? Amy Foster shook her head quickly. No, we hate war. Fighting is destructive and wasteful, but when conflict happens anyway, we try to learn something from it. We try to find ways to make sure the suffering leads to something better. That's why we're offering partnership instead of demanding surrender, Lisa Carter explained. You've all proven you're worth partnering with. Fighting against you taught us that working with you would be much better than fighting against you. Jake. Morrison pulled up tactical displays on the main hologram system. Look at this battle from 8 months ago. Zephyrian forces were outnumbered 3-1, but they held their position for 6 days to protect a medical facility. That's not just good tactics, that's moral courage. Or this engagement, Amy Foster added, highlighting another battle. Manthari warriors shared their food supplies with captured enemy soldiers. They followed proper treatment protocols even. when their own people were starving. The examples continued. Acts of honor, courage, and decency that had occurred during the worst parts of the conflict. Moments when different species had chosen to do the right thing even when it cost them. Tactical advantages. We kept detailed records of every honorable action, Peter Hayes explained. Every time someone chose mercy over vengeance, protection over profit, or honor over easy victory. Those records convinced us that peace with you wasn't just possible. It was desirable. The alien delegates began to understand, but the understanding brought new fears. If humans cataloged every action during war, if they remembered every choice made under pressure, what kind of species possessed such detailed awareness of their enemy's behavior? Hive Queen Zikith spoke carefully. You watched us constantly. You analyzed our every decision. You know our strengths and weaknesses better than we know them ourselves. Yes, Lisa Carter replied simply. And now you offer to share this knowledge with us, to help us become stronger, to give us technologies that would make us more capable of fighting you in the future. Yes. Why would you make potential enemies more dangerous? Lisa Carter stood up and returned to the center of the room. Because we don't want enemies. We want partners. The galaxy is huge, full of challenges that no single species can handle alone. We'd rather face those challenges together than waste time fighting each other. The simple logic was undeniable, but it represented a fundamental shift in how galactic politics worked. For thousands of years, species had competed for resources, territory, and dominance. The human approach suggested cooperation instead of competition, partnership instead of domination. Besides, Jake Morrison added with a slight smile, if you become stronger and decide to fight us again someday, at least it would be a fair fight. Humans like fair fights. The comment was meant to be reassuring, but it had the opposite effect. The idea that humans actively preferred challenging conflicts over easy victories suggested a species that thrived on danger in ways that no other civilization could understand. The alien delegates gathered in the station's private conference rooms after the humans left for their evening meal. Each species needed time to discuss what they had learned, but more importantly, they needed to share their growing fears about humanity. Shard Commander Velthak stood at the center of the Zephyrian delegation, his crystal body pulsing with worried light patterns. The humans are not what we expected, he said to his advisors. Their behavior follows no known pattern of galactic civilization. His second-in-command, Crystal Singer Nalhek, dimmed with concern. They observe everything, remember everything, and analyze everything. During the war, we thought we were fighting a typical aggressive species. Now we discover they were studying us like specimens in a laboratory. Worse than that, added another Zephyrian. They were deliberately limiting their own advantages to get better data on our capabilities. What kind of species handicaps itself during war just to learn more about its enemies? In the Manthari section, Hive Queen Zikith communicated rapidly with her warriors through complex chemical signals. The conversation moved too quickly for the translation systems to follow, but the agitation was obvious. Finally, she spoke aloud for the benefit of the recording systems. The greater hive mind is deeply troubled, she announced. Humans demonstrate pack-hunting behavior, but they extend pack loyalty to non-humans. This violates every principle of evolutionary biology we understand. One of her warriors clicked agreement. During the conflict, we intercepted human communications. Their soldiers spoke of enemy casualties with genuine regret. They expressed concern for civilian populations they had never met. This suggests emotional responses that serve no survival purpose. It suggests a species that has evolved beyond normal survival instincts, Zicht replied. They form emotional bonds with creatures that pose direct threats to their existence. Such behavior should have been eliminated by natural selection millennia ago. The smaller species huddled together in their own conference area, sharing information through a mixture of musical tones, electromagnetic signals, and chemical releases. The Velkari delegation rustled with nervous energy, while the Threnodi sang worried harmonies. "We have discovered something disturbing about human recreational activities," announced Elder Groot of the Velkari. His bark-like skin was darker than usual, indicating high stress levels. "During our research into human culture, we found that they voluntarily subject themselves to fear, pain, and danger for entertainment." The other species listened with growing alarm as Groot described human sports, adventure activities, and entertainment media. "They compete in activities that would be considered military training by our standards. They watch recordings of fictional conflicts for enjoyment. They seek out dangerous experiences and call them fun." A Threnodi elder sang a trembling melody that translated as deep concern. "Our analysis of human child-rearing practices reveals even more disturbing patterns. Human young are taught basic combat techniques as play activities. They compete in games that simulate warfare, resource management, and strategic thinking. Their educational systems include mandatory physical challenges designed to push students beyond their comfort zones," added another Threnodi. "They believe that overcoming artificial difficulties makes their young stronger and more capable." The Manthari warrior who had been monitoring human communications rejoined the discussion. "We have intercepted more human cultural data. Their history shows repeated patterns of survival through catastrophic events. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plague outbreaks. Their planet has experienced multiple extinction-level events, and humans survived all of them," Zicht observed. "Not just survived, they adapted and grew stronger. Each catastrophe forced them to develop new technologies, new social structures, new survival strategies." Crystal singer Nalhek accessed the shared data networks. "According to our xenobiological analysis, Earth experienced more life-threatening events than any other known habitable world. The human homeworld should have produced a cautious, defensive species focused on avoiding risks. Instead," Velthak said quietly, "it produced a species that actively seeks challenges and views obstacles as opportunities for growth." The revelation sent ripples of unease through all the alien delegations. A species that had been shaped by constant catastrophe would have evolved psychological traits completely foreign to civilizations that had developed on more stable worlds. Elder Groot brought up additional research on human behavior patterns. "Their response to stress is unlike any species we have encountered. When faced with danger, most civilizations become more territorial, more protective of resources, more suspicious of outsiders. Humans do the opposite," sang a Threnodi analyst. "Historical records show that they become more cooperative during crises. They share resources more freely when supplies are limited. They form stronger social bonds when threatened by external dangers." The implications were staggering. If humans became more generous and cooperative under pressure, their current offers of partnership and aid might actually increase if conditions became more difficult. Hive Queen Zicht accessed military records from the recent conflict. "Review the final months of our war. As human casualties increased, their treatment of prisoners improved. As their supply lines were stretched, they began sharing medical supplies with our wounded. As the fighting intensified, They became more concerned about civilian populations. It is as if suffering activates protective instincts that extend beyond their own species, observed a Manthari strategist. Pain makes them more caring, not more cruel. The alien delegates struggled to understand the psychological mechanisms that could produce such behavior. In their experience, species became more violent and selfish when threatened, not more altruistic and cooperative. "There is something else," Velthak said, his crystal form flickering with deep concern. "The humans mentioned that Earth's children learn combat techniques for fun. We dismiss this as typical predator behavior, but consider the implications." He activated a holographic display showing human population data. Earth has over 12 billion humans. If even a small percentage of them possess combat training as basic education, that represents the largest potential military force in galactic history. "And they are offering to teach us their techniques," added Crystal Singer Nalhek. "They want to share combat knowledge that could be used against them. This suggests either incredible confidence in their superiority or complete lack of normal self-preservation instincts." The Manthari delegation clicked urgently among themselves before Zikth spoke for them. "Our analysis suggests both interpretations may be correct. Humans appear confident in their abilities because they lack normal fear responses. They have been shaped by a world that required constant adaptation to survive." A small Threnody delegate sang a question that made everyone pause. If humans evolved on a world of constant catastrophe, and they respond to stress by becoming more cooperative and generous, what happens when they encounter the normal challenges of galactic civilization? The silence that followed was deeply uncomfortable. The alien delegates were beginning to realize that they were dealing with a species that might become more helpful, more innovative, and more determined as galactic challenges increased. They mentioned that Earth's settlements have detailed plans for rebuilding civilization from scratch, Elder Groot noted quietly, as if they expect their worlds to be destroyed and want to be prepared for reconstruction. "They plan for catastrophe, the way other species plan for prosperity," Zikth observed. "This suggests a level of long-term strategic thinking that extends beyond normal governmental planning cycles." The implications were becoming clear to all the delegates. Humans didn't just survive disasters. They prepared for them, planned for them, and apparently thrived during them. Their offers of partnership weren't desperate attempts to avoid conflict, but calculated strategies for turning former enemies into allies before the next inevitable crisis arrived. "What kind of species?" Velthak asked quietly. "Actively prepares for the end of civilization while simultaneously working to help potential enemies become stronger." None of the alien delegates had an answer that didn't terrify them. 6 months after the peace treaty was signed, the galaxy looked different than anyone had expected. Concordia Prime had become a permanent diplomatic station, but instead of hosting occasional crisis meetings, it buzzed with constant activity, as human-alien partnerships developed at unprecedented speed. Ambassador Lisa Carter stood in her new office, looking out at ships from a dozen different species docked at the station. What had once been a place for ending wars had become the center of something entirely new in galactic politics. Her door chimed and Jake Morrison entered carrying a report. "The latest requests," he said, setting the documents on her desk. 3. More species want human consultation on territorial disputes. The Andromedans are asking for help with their resource distribution problems, and the Tau Centauri Federation wants to know if we can teach their diplomats how to read micro-expressions. Lisa shook her head with amusement. 6 months ago, half the galaxy was shooting at us. Now, they want us to solve their problems. Amy Foster joined them, carrying her own stack of reports. The joint research projects are exceeding all expectations. Zephyrian crystal technology combined with human medical techniques has produced life extension treatments that work for 17 different species. The Manthari terraforming projects have already created 3 new breeding worlds. And the defensive partnerships? Lisa asked. Jake Morrison smiled. Better than we hoped. Human patrol fleets are protecting 42 smaller species from pirate raids and territorial aggression. But here's the interesting part. We're not doing most of the actual fighting. Our reputation is enough to make most troublemakers think twice. The reputation Jake mentioned had spread throughout the galaxy faster than anyone anticipated. Stories of human behavior during the peace negotiations had become legend, though the details had grown more dramatic with each retelling. Peter Hayes entered the office carrying his ever-present tablet. The Galactic Council voted this morning. You're officially the first human member, Lisa. They want you to chair the new Conflict Prevention Committee. Lisa Carter had become something unique in galactic politics, a diplomat whose primary skill was preventing wars before they started. Her ability to think several conflicts ahead while simultaneously planning reconstruction efforts had proven invaluable for species who were used to reactive rather than proactive diplomacy. Speaking of the Council, Amy Foster said, they want to standardize the human approach to peace negotiations. They're calling it the Concordia Protocol. The Concordia Protocol represented everything the alien species had learned about human diplomatic methods. Instead of establishing boundaries and limitations, treaties now focused on integration and mutual benefit. Instead of winner-takes-all territorial divisions, agreements created shared development projects. Instead of tribute payments from losers to winners, all parties contributed resources to joint ventures that benefited everyone. Jake Morrison pulled up a holographic display showing the current state of galactic politics. Green zones now covered twice as much territory as they had 6 months earlier. Yellow disputed areas were being converted to green zones at unprecedented rates. Most remarkably, red conflict zones were disappearing entirely. The Kepler Rebellion ended yesterday, he reported. Both sides requested human mediation instead of fighting it out. We had them working on joint infrastructure projects within a week. Amy Foster highlighted another section of the galaxy. The Vega mining dispute was resolved through resource-sharing agreements. Instead of fighting over asteroid mining rights, all parties are now cooperating on deep space mining operations that benefit everyone. Peter Hayes looked up from his tablet. The most interesting development is what other species are calling the human effect. Civilizations that have never had contact with Earth are starting to copy our diplomatic methods. The human effect had surprised everyone, including the humans themselves. Species across the galaxy had begun analyzing human behavior and attempting to replicate the results. The concept of viewing former enemies as potential allies was spreading through galactic civilization like a new philosophy. The Rigel Confederacy just announced a partnership with the species they've been fighting for 30 years, Peter continued. They said they were inspired by human methods and wanted to try cooperation instead of conquest. Lisa Carter walked back to the window, watching ships arrive and depart from the station. Each vessel represented species that had once considered humans to be dangerous unknowns. Now they came seeking advice, partnership, and friendship. Amy Foster joined her at the window. The xenobiology reports are fascinating. Other species are starting to show behavioral changes after extended contact with humans. They're becoming more cooperative, more willing to take calculated risks, more interested in long-term planning. Is that good or bad? Lisa asked. Both, probably, Amy replied. We're changing how the galaxy approaches conflict resolution, but we're also making everyone more like us. The question is whether that's what's best for galactic civilization. Jake Morrison brought up another display showing human expansion throughout the galaxy. Earth's colonies were spreading rapidly, but unlike traditional colonization patterns, human settlements were integrated with alien populations from the beginning. Mixed species colonies were becoming the norm rather than the exception. Colony ship New Horizon reports successful integration with Velkari agricultural specialists, he read from his reports. Combined human Velkari farming techniques are producing crop yields 3 times higher than either species achieved alone. New Tokyo Station is hosting the first interspecies university, Peter Hayes added. Students from 27 different species are learning together. The Threnody music program is particularly popular with human students. The interspecies education programs had been Amy Foster's idea, based on her observation that different species could learn from each other more effectively than anyone had imagined. Human students were discovering alien approaches to mathematics, science, and art that opened entirely new fields of study. Alien students were learning human methods of creative problem-solving and adaptive thinking. The most significant development, Amy Foster said, is what's happening to conflict resolution throughout the galaxy. Species that have never met humans are starting to use our methods because they work better than traditional approaches. Lisa Carter turned back to her colleagues. Are we changing the galaxy or is the galaxy changing us? Yes, Jake Morrison replied with a grin. Both things are happening at the same time. The transformation was indeed mutual. Humans were learning alien technologies, philosophical approaches, and cultural perspectives that expanded their understanding of the universe. Meanwhile, alien species were adopting human attitudes toward cooperation, risk-taking, and adaptive planning that made them more resilient and innovative. Peter Hayes pulled up the final report of the day. Long-range sensors are detecting signs of a new threat from outside the galaxy. Something big is headed this way, and it doesn't look friendly. The news would have caused panic 6 months earlier. Different species would have begun preparing. Individual defense strategies, competing for resources, and forming exclusive alliances based on military strength. Instead, Lisa Carter smiled. How long do we have? Approximately 18 months until first contact, Peter replied. Perfect, Amy Foster said. That gives us time to organize a proper welcome. Jake Morrison was already thinking tactically. We'll need coordination between all the major fleets, shared intelligence networks, and joint training exercises. The good news is that we've been practicing cooperation for months. Lisa Carter returned to her desk and began making notes. This is exactly the kind of challenge that brings out the best in everyone. By the time this external threat arrives, they'll be facing a united galaxy instead of scattered competing civilizations. The approaching danger represented everything humans had been preparing for throughout their history. An unknown challenge that would require adaptation, cooperation, and innovative thinking. But now they wouldn't face it alone. They had allies who had learned to think like humans, and humans had learned to work with species whose capabilities complemented their own. Outside the window, more ships arrived at Concordia Prime. Not ships, bringing news of conflicts to be resolved, but ships carrying delegations eager to contribute to galactic defense preparations. The galaxy was no longer a collection of separate civilizations competing for resources and territory. It had become something unprecedented in cosmic history. A cooperative alliance of different species working together toward common goals, led by the one species that had evolved to thrive on impossible challenges and turn enemies into friends. The emergency alert reached every inhabited system in the galaxy within hours. Long-range sensors had detected the external threat much sooner than expected. What was supposed to be 18 months of preparation time had suddenly become 6 weeks. The unknown fleet approaching from outside the galaxy was massive, fast, and clearly hostile. Lisa Carter stood in the new Galactic Defense Command Center on Concordia Prime, surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time data from thousands of monitoring stations. The approaching fleet was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Hundreds of ships, each larger than the biggest vessels any known species had ever built. Jake Morrison entered the command center, carrying urgent reports from across the galaxy. All major species are mobilizing their fleets. The Zephyrians are moving their crystal ships to defensive positions. The Manthari are launching every hive ship they have. Even the smaller species are contributing whatever vessels they can spare. Amy Foster looked up from her analysis station. The good news is that our joint training exercises over the past months are paying off. Fleet coordination is happening faster than anyone thought possible. The bad news is that we're still outnumbered about 10-1. Peter Hayes was monitoring communications from across the galaxy. Every species is asking the same question. How do we fight something we know nothing about? Traditional defensive strategies assume you understand your enemy's capabilities and motivations. Lisa Carter studied the sensor data showing the approaching fleet. The ships moved in perfect formation, maintaining precise distances and coordinated speed changes. Whatever species was controlling them had military discipline that impressed even human observers. "What do we know about them so far?" she asked. Amy Foster brought up detailed analysis reports. "The ships use technology we don't recognize. Their energy signatures don't match any known propulsion systems. They're not responding to any communication attempts in any language or mathematical format we've tried. Most importantly," Jake Morrison added, "they're heading directly for the most heavily populated systems in the galaxy. This isn't random exploration. They know where we live, and they're coming for us." The realization sent chills through the command center. An outside force that possessed detailed knowledge of galactic civilization, while remaining completely unknown, suggested intelligence gathering on a massive scale. Someone had been watching and planning for a very long time. Shard Commander. Velthak materialized in the command center through holographic projection, his crystal form flickering with urgency. "The Zephyrian Collective offers our full resources to the defense effort. Our crystal ships can withstand energy weapons better than most vessels. We will take point positions in the battle formations." Hive Queen Zikth appeared through another projection, her compound eyes reflecting determination. "The Manthari pledge every warrior, every ship, every weapon we possess. Our hive ships will serve as mobile command centers for coordinated attacks. One by one, leaders from species across the galaxy joined the holographic conference. Each offered their unique capabilities to the common defense. The Velkari provided advanced camouflage technology. The Threnodi contributed sonic weapons that could disrupt enemy communications. Dozens of smaller species added their specialized knowledge and equipment. Lisa Carter listened to each offer, mentally cataloging how different technologies and tactics could be combined. "This is exactly what we hoped for," she said to her human colleagues, "a unified response instead of individual defensive efforts." But as reports continued coming in, the scale of the challenge became clear. The external fleet wasn't just large. It was organized in ways that suggested a single, coordinated intelligence controlling hundreds of vessels simultaneously. No known galactic civilization had ever achieved that level of fleet coordination. Amy Foster pulled up tactical simulations that made everyone pause. Even with perfect coordination between all galactic species, the numbers don't look good. We need something more than just combining our existing capabilities. Peter Hayes accessed historical databases from human military archives. Earth's military history suggests that when facing overwhelming odds, the key is to change the nature of the conflict. Make the enemy fight the kind of battle they didn't prepare for. Jake Morrison nodded thoughtfully. The approaching fleet maintains perfect formations and coordinated movements. That suggests they're optimized for large-scale organized combat. But what if we don't give them that kind of fight? Lisa Carter began to smile as an idea formed. What if instead of meeting them with traditional fleet battles, we use the one advantage we have that they can't possibly know about? "What advantage?" asked Velthak through his holographic projection. "Human unpredictability combined with alien innovation," Lisa replied. "They've been watching galactic civilization, studying how different species fight wars. But they've been watching us when we were separate civilizations competing against each other." Amy Foster caught on immediately. "They don't know about the cooperative alliance we've built. They're expecting traditional galactic warfare, species fighting for individual survival, competing for resources, betraying allies when convenient. Instead," Jake Morrison continued, "they're going to face something that's never existed before in galactic history. Multiple species working together as a single adaptive force." The implications began to spread through the holographic conference as alien leaders realized what the humans were suggesting. The external threat had studied galactic civilization extensively, but they had studied the old version of galactic politics. They were prepared to face divided, competitive species, not a unified alliance. Peter Hayes brought up communication records from the past 6 months. "Look at how much our cooperative capabilities have grown. Zephyrian crystal technology integrated with Manthari hive mind coordination. Velkari stealth systems combined with human adaptive tactics. Threnody sonic weapons synchronized with multi-species fleet movements. The external fleet is optimized to fight against known galactic military doctrines," Amy Foster realized. "But we're not using known doctrines anymore. We're using hybrid strategies that combine the best capabilities from multiple species." Hive Queen. Zix's compound eyes brightened with understanding. "They have prepared to face individual species defending their own territories. They will encounter integrated defense forces protecting shared colonies." Velthak's crystal form pulsed with excitement. "Their intelligence data is outdated. They expect us to compete with each other for survival. Instead, we will coordinate for mutual protection." Lisa Carter activated the command center's main strategic display. "Here's what we're going to do. Instead of meeting them with conventional fleet formations, we're going to use the most human approach possible. We're going to improvise." The alien leaders listened with growing amazement as Lisa outlined a defense strategy unlike anything in military history. Rather than predetermined battle plans, they would use adaptive response teams that could change tactics in real time based on enemy actions. Instead of rigid command structures, they would use distributed decision-making that allowed local commanders to modify strategies instantly. Human military doctrine emphasizes flexibility over predictability, Jake Morrison explained. We plan for uncertainty and adapt to changing conditions. That's exactly the opposite of what the external fleet appears to be optimized for. Amy Foster brought up examples of successful human military campaigns. Throughout Earth's history, smaller forces have defeated larger ones by refusing to fight the kind of battle the enemy expected. We change the rules of engagement until our advantages become more important than their advantages. But the key difference, Peter Hayes added, is that we're not just using human unpredictability. We're combining it with alien innovations and capabilities that humans never developed alone. The strategy that emerged over the following hours represented something completely new in galactic warfare. Human adaptive thinking combined with Zephyrian durability, Manthari coordination, Velkari stealth, Threnody sonic disruption, and dozens of other specialized capabilities from smaller species. They're expecting to fight the old galaxy, Lisa Carter concluded. Instead, they're going to encounter something that's never existed before. A cooperative alliance that becomes stronger under pressure, more innovative when challenged, and more unified when threatened. The external fleet continued its approach, confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage and detailed intelligence about galactic military capabilities. But their intelligence data was 6 months out of date, and in those 6 months, human influence had transformed galactic civilization into something unprecedented. For the first time in galactic history, hundreds of different species were preparing to fight as a single adaptive force guided by the one species that had evolved to thrive on impossible challenges and turn every crisis into an opportunity for growth. The first battle began at the edge of the Kepler system, where the external fleet encountered something they had not expected. Instead of traditional defensive formations protecting fixed positions, they faced small mixed species groups that moved unpredictably through space, striking quickly and disappearing before return fire could be coordinated. Admiral Sarah Brooks commanded the human contingent from her flagship, the UES Harmony, working alongside alien commanders in ways that would have been impossible just months earlier. Her tactical display showed dozens of small engagement groups, each containing ships from multiple species working together with perfect coordination. Strike Group 7 reports successful hit on enemy formation Delta, announced her communications officer, Lieutenant Dan Foster. Zephyrian crystal ships absorbed the return fire while Manthari vessels disabled 3 enemy ships with coordinated hive mind targeting. Amy Foster, now serving as xenobiological advisor to the fleet, monitored enemy behavior patterns from her station on the bridge. The external fleet is trying to establish traditional battle lines. They're regrouping into larger formations every time we hit them with small group tactics. Jake Morrison, coordinating ground-based operations, appeared on the main screen from the surface of Kepler Prime. Enemy landing attempts are failing. They're sending large, organized invasion forces that expect to face single-species defensive units. Instead, they're meeting integrated defense teams that adapt faster than they can respond. The battle raged for 6 hours, but it was unlike any conflict in galactic history. The external fleet possessed superior firepower and numerical advantage, but they couldn't establish the kind of organized, large-scale combat they were designed for. Every time they formed traditional battle lines, small mixed-species groups would attack from unexpected angles, forcing them to break formation. Lisa Carter watched the battle unfold from the Galactic Defense Command Center, coordinating strategy, with military leaders across dozens of species. The holographic displays showed a three-dimensional chess game being played across multiple star systems simultaneously. "Strike Group 12 needs support," she announced. "Velkari stealth ships are providing cover, but they're facing heavier resistance than expected." Hive Queen Zikth responded immediately through her holographic projection. "Manthari reinforcements moving to assist Strike Group 12. Our Hive ships will provide coordinated fire support while maintaining tactical flexibility. The coordination that had developed over months of joint training was proving invaluable. Species that had once competed for resources were now sharing targeting data, coordinating supply lines, and adapting their tactics in real time based on input from dozens of different military traditions." Peter Hayes monitored communications, intercepts from the enemy fleet. "We're picking up fragments of their internal communications. They're using a completely unknown language, but the mathematical patterns suggest confusion and frustration." Amy Foster analyzed the intercepted data. "They're trying to establish communication protocols with individual species, probably attempting to negotiate separate peace treaties. Standard divide-and-conquer tactics that work against competitive civilizations." "But we're not competitive anymore," Admiral Brooks noted with satisfaction. "Every species in this alliance knows that their survival depends on everyone else's survival. There's no benefit to separate negotiations." The external fleet's confusion became more apparent as the battle continued. Their ships were optimized for large-scale engagements against predictable enemy formations. When faced with small, adaptive groups that combine technologies and tactics from multiple species, their advantages became less decisive. Jake Morrison reported from the surface operations. "Enemy ground forces are withdrawing from Kepler Prime. They can't establish the kind of organized beachheads their tactics require when facing integrated defensive units." The integrated defense units represented everything humans had taught other species about cooperative warfare. Instead of single-species military units defending specific territories, mixed teams protected shared resources and supported each other regardless of species boundaries. "The most interesting development," Amy Foster observed, "is how quickly alien species are adopting human tactical flexibility. Zephyrian commanders are making real-time strategy adjustments that would have been impossible under their traditional, rigid command structures." Lisa Carter nodded. "And human commanders are using alien coordination capabilities that we never developed on our own. Manthari hive mind communication is allowing tactical coordination across distances that human technology can't match." The battle reached a turning point when the external fleet attempted their largest coordinated assault yet. Hundreds of enemy ships moved in perfect formation toward the most heavily defended system, expecting to overwhelm galactic defenses through sheer numerical superiority. Instead, they encountered the full power of cooperative galactic defense. Zephyrian crystal ships formed protective barriers while Manthari vessels provided coordinated targeting data. Velkari stealth technology allowed surprise attacks from multiple directions simultaneously. Threnody sonic weapons disrupted enemy communications across their entire formation. Human ships provided the adaptive coordination that held everything together, adjusting tactics in real time and ensuring that each species' capabilities were used most effectively. The result was a defensive response that was far more than the sum of its parts. Admiral Brooks watched her tactical display as the enemy formation began to collapse. "They're breaking off the attack. Enemy ships are scattering in all directions." Peter Hayes monitored the communication intercepts with growing excitement. "We're detecting increased chatter between enemy vessels. The mathematical patterns suggest they're trying to understand what they're facing. Amy Foster brought up analysis of enemy behavior throughout the battle. Look at this pattern. Every time they encounter mixed species tactical groups, their response time increases. They're having to analyze and adapt to combinations of technologies and strategies they've never seen before. Their intelligence data prepared them to fight individual species using known tactics, Jake Morrison observed. They can't adapt fast enough to counter hybrid approaches that combine multiple species capabilities. Lisa Carter realized that the battle had proven something important about the alliance they had built. We're not just cooperating, we're evolving. Each engagement teaches us new ways to combine our different strengths. The external fleet's retreat became a full withdrawal as more mixed-species strike groups achieved successful engagements. The enemy had expected to face a galaxy of competing civilizations, and instead encountered a unified alliance that became more effective under pressure. Enemy fleet is moving to the edge of sensor range, Admiral Brooks reported. They're regrouping, but maintaining defensive positions rather than preparing for another attack. Hive Queen Zixth's projection showed obvious satisfaction. They came to conquer divided species and found united civilizations. Their tactics are optimized for the wrong kind of enemy. Velthak's crystal form pulsed with confidence. The first engagement is ours, but they will adapt their strategies. The next battle will be different. Lisa Carter looked at the tactical displays showing the external fleet's withdrawal. Then we'll adapt too. That's what this alliance does best. We learn, we grow, and we become stronger together. The first battle was over, but both sides knew it was only the beginning. The external fleet had learned that the galaxy was no longer the collection of competing civilizations. Their intelligence had prepared them to fight, and the Galactic Alliance had learned that their cooperative approach to warfare was even more effective than they had hoped. The real test would come when the external fleet adapted their tactics to account for the unified response they now knew they were facing.